Heyla, welcome to Coffee with Avila. I just said Avia. Welcome to Coffee with Avila. I'm Aviana Lemaire. I'm going to talk about today one of the heavier impacts of money in our lives because I've been thinking about it a lot and because I've recorded this video before and it just wouldn't take, but I refused to give up. So I'm taking a moment right now when I should be eating my breakfast, but I'm just going to try this while my hunger pangs set in because I just have not been able to get the video together. I'm thinking about how the money thing goes a whole lot deeper than a lot of us know. And the reason why I'm thinking about this is because I've been through it on this subject, and I'll quickly say there was one day I was watching a television program and somebody was talking about having survived abuse, and all of a sudden the host, just in passing, referenced what she had been through as financial abuse. I was kind of frozen in my tracks for a moment because I've never heard that term used. And while the term isn't important unto itself, what you call it doesn't make it real. As someone who's been through it and has suffered multiple horrible things in silence, I have noticed that when somebody out there in the rest of the world who's not experiencing it deigns to give it a name, it tends to suggest that it might be a little less completely impossible for those of us who've been through it to admit that it ever happened. Once the name is out there, it's circulating and the people are talking about it, it's like they're acknowledging that this thing is real and it took place. So that would definitely be the direct name for some of what I've been through. And on that vein, I think it's very important for some of us to know we haven't just had a difficult time in life. A lot of what we've been through has been money being used in our life as a distinct and specific humiliation ritual. Now, I don't know if I'm about to play Stardew Valley or what. I've been having a time of it, and I'm choosing to alchemize the energy once again and make a video instead. So I'm about to play my game. I've got the computer, I've got my coffee. It's not mixed, but it's here. And it's buttered coffee today, so if you see it, it might not look delicious, but I'm going to mix it before you see it, so it will be delicious because the butter separates and rises after a while, and I'm talking, so it's going to have the time. But long story short, and this is not going to be a long story short situation because this is a long story, but money is a humiliation ritual. I suddenly realized one day that what I was experiencing, well, I'll put it this way. What's been happening is that I've seen that the term humiliation ritual has been trending. And because I have seen that this term has been trending, I've been running into it a lot. And when I'm not looking for it, I'm running into people who are just in the spiritual stratosphere talking about it. And they are talking a lot. And it's unexpected, and it's gotten me thinking because it was something that I went through. And I tend to have an experience where I take a very conscious experience approach to things like the holidays, for instance, because that's kind of like a well-seated, it doesn't have to be a specific situation like what I went through where somebody walks through and like check the kitchen, and if there's enough food, they take more money out of the household to make sure that you can't get enough food anymore. It could just be the experience of going to work and feeling unsafe, feeling unloved, feeling like you're not living your life's purpose. A lot of the modern tradition of money is a humiliation ritual, and it's going to, at this point, be a matter of your perspective. But if you're still listening, you probably have already had some realizations about this, or you're clicking in some way. It's not a coincidence that the system has been built in such a way that a lot of people have to give up on everything. It shouldn't be the norm. We live in a world where things seem like they're the norm, and people are like, I had to give up my dreams to make money, but that's how it works. And you hear statements like that all the time, and this should obviously not be how it works. In fact, there are some places and societies, great, now I've got a tickle on my nose. We're doing this. This video is happening today. This one is going out, and I intend to do it unedited, so we're really going to see, because that's like a challenge to, I don't know, Mercury right now. Did I say I've been having every experience that seems like everything I've heard of all of my life about Mercury retrograde? So I literally looked it up to see if it was happening, because I'm like, Something's got to be wrong with the whole universe right now. Boom, there we are. So today we're getting this out. I think that there must be some reason why I need to say this, because no matter how many times I've failed to get this video recorded, it just still weighs on my mind. A lot of us are really accustomed to this concept that in order to make money, we're going to have to give up who we are. And that's twisted. I've heard tale of societies and lifestyles where you don't have to do that. I'm looking for my cozy now from my remote, and I don't see that, but that's also not going to stop me or pause this video. There are some instances in life, and you hear about them, it seems rare and amazing, and a lot of us strive for this, or we fantasize about it, or we just ache, and sometimes we just hurt a lot thinking about it. There are some instances in life where somebody manages to bring in legal currency while doing something that they actually care about, doing what they're built to do, what God wove into their bodies and their systems. Because when we're doing what's wrong, we know it's wrong because it feels wrong the entire time. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of us don't have to spend a lot of time in prayer or meditation. We just can feel the constant pain crushing in from us from all around or from all within. And it might be because we're physically uncomfortable in the job. It might be because we feel safe. There might be someone there who's hostile, or there might be someone there who just doesn't think you're worth anything and isn't paying attention. Or you might just be someone who's in a job that could be good for someone else, but it doesn't click with you. Whatever the situation is, it seems like everyone in the world is having now, or has had, the experience of having to give up something of the essence of who they are in order to get paid. And a lot of us in the world are having to get paid in order to afford food, in order to feed ourselves, our loved ones, in order to afford shelter. We live in a world where people charge you for water. And I'm going to sidestep that one, but a lot of people are having to go through these daily humiliations where they're wearing things they don't feel comfortable in, or they're having whatever it is that's you, it's being stripped away. There are people out there who can't color their hair because they have to go to work and they can't do that at work. There are people there who can't, and it's just, this all is considered to be normal, but all of this stuff is slowly but surely breaking down the structure of humanity and individuality and ultimately God, because God is what made you who you are. And within reason, I'm not saying that you should necessarily be pasties and a G-string walking into your job at the law offices. I personally wouldn't necessarily desire to be living in that world, because I'd be presented with a whole lot of people from every place and every way, form, shape, and fashion and intent. Very specifically, every possible kind of intent, who are now walking around pasties and a G-string, and I can't do anything about it because it's just the norm. Excuse me, but I'm gonna have to take a sip now because morning, and I haven't eaten anything yet, so I'm gonna whisk my coffee. Hope that's not too loud, but again, it's buttered coffee. It needs to be whisked like you would never believe. It looks like a nightmare right now. Not to me, because I know it's butter, but I think to someone who didn't know, it almost looks like egg yolk floating around in there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. For me, sometimes it doesn't matter if I know what the thing is, as long as I know how gross it looks. But we're living in a world where whatever your personality is, and generally something reasonable is inherently programmed into us all. People don't necessarily teach us this outfit is reasonable, that hair color is reasonable, you know, but like my example from a few seconds ago, we have a tendency to just naturally know this at work is not okay. This is not what I want to see today. There are a lot of people who don't want to see that on the beach. There are a lot of people who don't want to see it in the mirror or in the bathroom or in the bedroom, but that's a whole nother story. It's just kind of a funny thought that's occurring to me right now. So I'm not saying that you should be able to walk around and do whatever to anyone, but I'm always saying things in a way that's metered and kind of makes sense. So I wouldn't be saying that. If you know me or you're accustomed to me, you'll know I just have a tendency to really go out and want to specify and put the information out there. And again, I've been listening to a bunch of videos where people will make a blanket statement and not specify, and I'm like, do you think that what you said still sounds correct? So now I'm going to be fastidious about it for a while, just so that everybody knows what I'm saying and it's totally clear. I like to be understood. And I definitely like to know I did what was reasonable to be understood. But long story short, a lot of stuff is going on in life that's not necessary. you shouldn't have to dye your hair from one shade of something to another shade of it in order to be taken seriously. But it's an aspect of making sure that you can't ultimately be whoever it is that you're meant to be. And on a spiritual level, these things can be going on without anyone even acknowledging spirituality or that they are of spirit. They don't need to know. A lot of people are just doing it. They're just following a tradition. They literally believe that's not professional. And the next thing you know, we end up in a world where you don't only have to change your hair color, you have to change your hair texture. You have to put that stuff away. You have to get a weave, you have to put it under a wig, or you have to do things that are harming your hair and your health. A part of the body, for me, being injured is harming your health. And people, there are varying opinions upon this, because people are like, oh, well, hair is just dead protein. But it isn't quite that simple for various reasons. And even if it is just dead protein, we do have a tendency to have, at the very least, a psychological connection with how it sits on us. And if we have the privilege to have it, if that's something you want and consider it to be a privilege, if you have the privilege to have it and to have it be healthy, there's something really messed up about feeling yourself having to fry it out with chemicals or actual blazing heat to get it into a state that someone else considers to be ordered and orderly enough. God made it, but that's not good enough for them. Somebody else needs to consider it to be ordered and orderly enough to be presented at work, because otherwise it's somehow not professional. You inherently are not professional. Your people are not professional. Your nature is not professional, whatever it is today. Hair color, hair texture, children going to school and having their traditional braids snipped off by hateful teachers. That's a thing I remember hearing about as a child, and I was like, dang. I knew that they could torture you about it, but I didn't know someone would take a sharp weapon near the head of an unwilling and frightened child and just start cutting. It's disturbing and it's distressing, and it's all just reflective of the level of spiritual hatred in the atmosphere toward what God created. And whatever it is that brings us comfort or joy, for some reason, seems to constantly be being attacked in the realm of money. We've gotten to a place in a world where, for a lot of us, for a great many of us, we need currency of some nature in order to survive, to get food, to get water, to have shelter. And then in order to get that currency, we have to do certain things in order to be told that we're earning it. And what we are earning is not only coming by way of shifting who we are from just something that seems as small as I've got to change my hair color so I can go to work, which can become a big thing because it's not always that easy. That's not always healthy. And then you end up in bad positions if it doesn't work out properly. But something that sounds as small as that, because I know that it sounds small to some, to something like, I grew up with women saying, I'm having health issues with my feet. It hurts. I'm in pain. They're now dealing with health issues, but they say, I have to wear heels for work. They hate wearing heels. They don't want to wear them. They don't want to wear them on a daily basis, and they don't want to have to wear them to work. But they now believe that they have to do something. Someone has got them in a position where, for whatever reason, some of them haven't used whatever might be a privilege to them to come together en masse and sue, because it's clearly prejudicial for one type of person to be looked at and be able to come into work in healthy flat shoes, or at least much healthier, and somebody else to be looked at and all of a sudden, no, you need to put on something that is clinically and scientifically proven to potentially be of great health issue and concern. You're not getting into work unless you're wearing that. But a lot of people believe that, and I grew up with that, and I used to think that's completely insane. You have to wear heels? We've got the same, okay, so I don't think they're cute. So in my mind, as a girl, I'm specific about my shoes. So it's a matter of taste. But as a child, I would be looking at this and thinking, we've got the same ugly shoes that guys have to wear. I didn't find men's shoes to be that attractive, right? So when I see something that looks exactly like a men's shoe, but it's in the women's department for women's feet, then I'm just like, okay, but we've got the same ugly shoes they have to wear. It's not about being stylish per se, because even if you're like, whoa, that's the coolest shoe and I love that flat style, I was still growing up in this time frame where women were like, I can't wear that one to work. I'd love to wear this out. I'll wear it on a date. I'll wear it just tending to my life, taking care of my kids. But when I go to work, I have to put on something that's high, that hurts, where I could twist an ankle. There's no telling what could be going on. And anything that goes on, it's one thing if you want to wear those shoes and you're aware of the risks and you're healthy and you can do it. And it's another thing when you literally are making choices like this because you know you, quote, have to. You feel like you need to put on this presentation. You have to wear a specific thing to go to your job or you won't be taken seriously. And it's not like they were necessarily going to be having an easy time of it to begin with, or not as easy as male counterparts. So now all of a sudden it's being super nitpicked on top of everything else, as things often were for all human females. Whatever it is that you're wearing has to be worn in exactly this specific way. So now you have to put on something that you don't feel comfortable in. And because it's not making you particularly more naked or something that seems obviously harassing, nobody's paying attention to the fact that it is in fact still taking you out of what feels safe and comfortable to you and making you do another thing. So there can be smaller levels of it, and this can hit different people on deeper levels. Some of us have more of an attachment to our clothing and our hair and our makeup and what that means and how we feel. So it might seem like a small thing to one person. Oh, I have to put on heels, whatever, I like heels. It might seem like a big thing to another person. Could be a health issue. Or they might just feel personally violated by being expected to do something like this. And this is a random example. I know not everyone has this experience, but it is something deep in my mind because those are the building blocks of how I grew up. And to this day, I still hear people saying, I have to wear heels for work. And they often say it on the heels of, I don't want to. I'm trying to do another thing. So then we come down to situations where there are people facing really traditional things that I don't want to get into because it's going to get way too amped up. But I just want to lightly touch on the heavy subject of people who are going to work and they're experiencing some level of mental abuse, social abuse. Sometimes it's a group. You might end up with that, what they like to call the mean girls group, which almost makes it sound like a small thing, because to me, mean girls sounds like school stuff. But then again, we live in a day and age where school kids are committing heinous, life-ending crimes, recording them and uploading them to social media because they think that's cool. So maybe it shouldn't sound that weak, but I just think mean girl makes it sound like you're relegating somebody to a smaller title, like they're not now the adult that they are supposed to be in order to go to work and earn the currency and create the environment for somebody else who's trying to go to work and earn the currency. It's almost like you're taking the responsibility from them for being the colleague or the boss. Sometimes you're ending up getting bullied. People are just chipping away at your spirit, at your soul. They're just sapping the energy out of you, making sure that you're confused, saying things that are making you feel unsafe in general. They might be making it harder for you to do your job, maybe not giving you the same kind of help or helping hand that they would give to somebody else they think they like or someone else inside of the group. You might just be being blocked out of conversation. People might just passively think you're weird. I mean, here I sit neurodivergent talking about how people can block you out in a work environment. Are you kidding? I didn't even realize the parallel until just now. People can just passively think you're weird, I was saying, and for them, I said this to a friend once, and this friend said it really helped because they've been battered with the word weird, and it's hurtful, and it comes out in a hurtful way, and it's dismissive. People be like, that's weird, you're weird. No, that's just weird. That thought is weird. That thing that you're doing is weird. The outfit is weird. Whatever is weird. And it can seem like, again, another kind of embarrassing or humiliating thing to say, but what I said that seemed to have helped, I've noticed throughout the course of my life, people don't use the word weird exclusively as an insult. Sometimes they're saying it because a lot of people are built to just accept, like one of the differences with neurodivergence and neurotypicals is that neurotypicals fall into the fold much easier for whatever reason. They just are. It's easier for them to accept the status quo and do what people have told them to do based on it being the status quo. Whereas as neurodivergents, we're also like, but we're always often like But why? I don't get it. Why is it working that way? Why does this make more sense? Why is that more efficient? Why is it kinder? Why is it better for everyone? Why do I have to do it too? Why are you telling me to do it instead of doing what I already was? We have questions, and we can't just naturally fall into the fold. But for somebody who does, and they're accustomed to the fold and what everyone does and the status quo, they run into something that's not. And they haven't been challenged in this way. And for whatever reason, their mind isn't geared to naturally question in the same ways that ours is. So it's a big deal. They don't know how to process it. It's putting information into a computer, but the computer doesn't have the program to process it. And so now it's just like, what is this? Unrecognized exception, right? So they will come out because their brain is like, can't process, I don't know what's happening, why is it happening, this isn't normal, I haven't been told it's normal. And that isn't necessarily backed with anything, it's just the terminology and it's the image. Do this, be normal, that's normal, this is normal, oh no, that's not normal. So they run into something they don't know how to deal with it, and they need to somehow process it, but they can't. So it's almost as if the computer then just stops the processes on trying to figure out what's going on and spits out a ticket that just says, that's weird, and then it moves on. It's just that it needs to put a label on it, like, I can't handle this, I can't process it, that's weird. Why can't I process it? Because it's weird. What does weird mean? ... No explanation. They don't necessarily know, and they're not necessarily saying it on purpose to be harmful. They're saying it because they've reached a point of confusion and they don't know what else to say. They don't know what else to do. And for some people, that point of confusion comes out very mean, and some people choose to be very turned up about it. But it's ultimately all just because they have absolutely no idea what's going on. It's really just an ignorance and the lack of capacity of everyone who taught them what the world is like to teach them why the world is like that and why the world is supposed to be that way. It's really not as much an intentional insult as it is a lack of capacity to say or accept or do any other thing in that moment. They just haven't been taught. And that's not entirely on them. A lot of people just get formed and they float through life doing whatever. They don't know exactly what they're doing, and so they'll just launch out and say something is weird. So let's, I really need to take a drink. I'm going to remix my coffee now. Let's just say that's going on in your work environment, and you end up in a situation where you're like, this feels like when I'm in school, it feels like high school, it feels like middle school, it feels like whenever, when there were mean girls and they did mistreat me. And the truth is, it feels that way because that's what it is. That's where they learned all of this stuff. And so they're going to continue to carbon copy it because they haven't been taught anything else in their whole lives through. And because they're not built to naturally question it or come up with another way, they're just going to keep hitting copy, paste, repeat, copy, paste, repeat over and over and over and over again because they don't know anything else. I forgot to put my stevia in my coffee, so I'm going to grab my stevia because, oh my God, that is not sweet. It's just, it is sometimes meant as an insult, but you also have to kind of pay attention to the fact that the person who's insulting you doesn't even necessarily understand the insult themselves. And so if it's that mindless, I'm not sure it can really, or it really should ultimately mean that much when you are sitting back thinking about the experience you've had and it's affecting your sensation of your self-worth. It shouldn't be affecting it that deeply because it's really not coming from much of a place at all. And a lot of times people will double down on, no, it is weird. You know, like I said, they will. But once again, it's all just coming from that place where there's an emptiness and a lack of knowledge, a lack of growth, a lack of understanding. So again, if you're dealing with something like that in the workplace, it can culminate into a gigantic, ultimate humiliation ritual, just like any other type of situational bullying circumstance where you are just in this bad place and for some reason people are just coming after you for who and what you are. And this could apply to neurodivergent people, neurotypical people, it could apply to anyone. But I'm just sitting here thinking about how deeply it can apply to us because a lot of the times we're ending up in a situation where we're not really doing what's best for us. We're not feeling comfortable. We're getting overwhelmed. There are a lot of people who aren't able to do a job outside of the house for various reasons. It could be physical. It could be the psyche is just not built for that, and it's torturing you. And some of us are concerned about living our life with meltdowns in front of people, and we definitely don't want that, in a workout environment. You wouldn't want that either. You wouldn't necessarily want it anywhere. Those of us who have meltdowns have a tendency to know this is not something we want to put on display. It's often a risk when everything in you is being improperly programmed to do things the wrong way, when you're doing something that doesn't suit you, when it's ultimately stressful, when the environment is weird or wrong or noisy. I have noticed, because I've always had weird living situations to varying degrees, it's kind of about what's going in and how incompatible it is with you. Everything is about some level of compatibility. If you're working an incompatible job and you've kind of gotten locked into a situation where that's just happening to you, that could be something else that feels a lot like you're being humiliated on a regular basis. In fact, there are a lot of people I've heard who were happy with their jobs at a certain point in life, or they were okay with it. They were either happy or they were content. They're like, yes, this is what you do, or they even enjoyed what they did. But at some point in life, something caused them to pause, look at something from a different perspective, and recognize that that wasn't what they were meant to do. It wasn't what they truly, ultimately, in a living spiritual mind wanted to do. And now they are retroactively embarrassed or humiliated, regretful, mourning, living in grief, sometimes over this past point of revenue. Whatever it was that they were doing, they were fine with in the moment, but then suddenly they're not fine with it because something changed, and you can see it differently. And that happens in a lot of situations in life. It can end up happening with a relationship, and relationships are very important to mention here. I was also raised in a world and a time and a society with some really classic and specific values, where I was theoretically told that I could do anything. But I also was ultimately raised that no matter what I did in my life, it was all going to come down to me eventually finding a man, getting married, settling down with him, and whatever I had built in my life was now going to be under his thumb. And it wasn't said as if it was going to be an inherently abusive thing. It was just a foregone conclusion that the culmination of my life was going to come. All my decisions, everything I had done to date, was going to come down to what this random man I hadn't even yet met. Whoa, it just got so bright. You don't even know, my curtains are almost closed. That's incredible. I'm still going to go on with this. It was always understood, and I was always raised to believe, I'm so outdone by how bright it is, that's so bright, that one day everything I'd ever done in my life would just basically go whoosh, because of a man. That I would meet him, whoever he would be, and he would not only, first and foremost, be the type of person who needs me to acquiesce to him on every subject, which to me is inherently abusive, 100%. Where I get erased, that's not okay. It's never going to be acceptable, and I'm never going to pretend that it is. That's in my case. I never wanted to be in a relationship where somebody else was going to make all my decisions, or where my decisions wouldn't count because there's going to be someone else ultimately making them for you. I basically didn't want to end up in another abusive parent-child situation. One of the reasons why I always had an issue with traditional marriage. But that's a huge subject that we're not going to get into right now, and that I probably don't need to, because a lot of us already know how that works. But I was raised to believe that that would be the case in my life. Everything that was programmed into me is that no matter what I did, one day it would get run by some random man that I hadn't even met yet, and then they might just put the kibosh on it. And that would be that. If I had a career, it was like, oh, you can do this, you can do that, you can do whatever you want. But then not really. And I sat back and thought about this one day, because I was like, there's a time frame on it. Whenever I meet the right person, or whoever now I say the right person, but then as a child I was like, whenever I meet the person I'm supposed to marry, then it doesn't matter what I've done, because if he doesn't like me doing it, it has to end. And I don't know how to even explain what I was feeling when I was first putting that together. And I put it together very early in life because it was like a puzzle. And one piece says, do anything you want. And the other person says, the buck stops here. You don't know. It's the Heisenberg uncertainty piece. That's really not a good example, actually, because that does suggest that you can have all the information. I guess it's more like the probability piece, where you just click it down and this storm unfolds and everything else that you've already put down in the puzzle might just disappear. And as time went by and years went by and I went through the adolescence and teenagehood and young adulthood and everything else, I did start to feel very humiliated by that. Because I was just crazy enough to be born into a world thinking I was a human being and I mattered. And it never occurred to me that I was going to magically not matter because of somebody else. I was taught all of these things, but there's no aspect of me that came to this world believing that I was inherently an inferior being and that everything that I did in my life needed to be decided by somebody else for the rest of time. And I definitely didn't assume that I wasn't ever going to be able to just have a healthy, and I haven't thus far been able to have a healthy reason. I've never found that connection of having a healthy experience with a work situation, having income that doesn't feel inherently humiliating to me for various reasons, and ultimately just feeling 100% secure in the fact that I could take care of myself in that way, because it's just always been this series of complicated situations. And so that left me in more bad situations. Like when I mean, the whole time I was growing up, the reason why there was no escaping was, this is traditional. People know this. It's a point of abuse, isolate people, take away their exit route. So there wasn't the money. There was a person who wanted to get me out of the situation, but literally just did not have the money to do it safely and to do it reliably. And if there were health issues involved and costs for different health-oriented things, that's a whole different concern, because you don't want to end up with some kind of health issue making it so that you can't survive if you manage to get away. It's just so much of that was more humiliation. The abuse itself was a series of humiliation rituals just compiled in order to make a grander sort of collaborative humiliation event out of them all. It was this huge conglomerate situation, and a huge amount of what went on in my life was literally just, there wasn't the money to make it stop or to get away. And so I sit here and think about the fact that money is a humiliation ritual for a lot of us.